I want to talk about this film while our producer is coming up here on stage. When I saw the description of this film, I was like, oh, we have a team of people that basically select the films for the festival. And I was like, please pick this film, because I don't want to have to override you. And I talked to the filmmaker about it, Harriet, because I grew up in a policy family. My auntie, in the summertime, and I didn't notice this, I lived with my aunt and uncle, they were childless. And, during the school year, I would just go to school every day. But in the summertime, my auntie would put me in the car in the morning, and we would go and we would visit these aunties and uncles. And they would, she'd have a little conversation with them. They'd hand her a little bit of change, she'd hand them a little piece of paper, and then we would go to the next auntie and uncle. Working her route. Exactly.
Come on now.
Working her route, and I was in the car. But those were happy times, because I was with her, and the conversation was always pleasant, usually about dreams or money or numbers with the aunties and the uncles. And of course, when we did that evening route, the aunties and the uncles that we visited, who were, not as nearly as many, would be happy because we could be giving them money. So I was like, this is my story right here.
Yeah.
So I want you to talk a little bit about the origin of the film and let the audience know what to expect.
Okay, sure. Hello, everybody.
Yes, hey.
You all beat the weather coming out, and I had a little struggle getting here myself. My name is Nathan Thompson. I am the author and publisher of Kings, the true story of Chicago's policy kings and numbers racketeers. A little bit of the work that I did, putting it together, actually happened in this university as well.
Wow.
So she's talking about her experience. Do you all know what policy is?
No.
You? Anybody? Hands up.
It's the lottery.
For the rest of you all, it is what you know today as the state lottery.
That's right.
But before it was the state lottery, it was the single biggest business enterprise, owned and operated by black men known as policy kings and numbers racketeers. Some of the biggest things that you can think of in American history: the Negro baseball leagues, black owned and operated banks and insurance companies, Ebony magazine, lots of other things have their origin in the policy business.
Right.
Money that was generated by the policy business was used to create some of our oldest and longest lasting black owned and operated business institutions.
That's right.
There are reasons why it all came to a crash. You're going to find that out in the film. The biggest policy king in the country in those days was Edward Jones, the man that you're going to be watching this film about. Ed Jones was the son of Reverend Dr. Edward Perry Jones, who was the co-founder of the National Black Baptist Convention. Ed Jones took what was basically regarded as a nickel and dime racket and turned it into a multi-million-dollar conglomerate.
That's right.
Nationwide in its heyday. And I'm talking about the 1930s and the 1940s. We're talking about a business enterprise that generated upwards of $200 million. Keep in mind, we're talking about $200 million with the valuation of the 1930s and 40s. I'm not sure if it's worth anything these days. So the takeaways that you're going to see is Ed Jones' story. It depicts how he comes up from Mississippi, gets into this business, creates this huge business, and then the government comes after him, and then gangsters come after him. So it's a struggle to maintain the business as well as to maintain his family structure. I don't want to give away a whole lot, but this is one story that literally replicates across the country. Chicago and Ed Jones is just one story. There's just as much activity going on right here in Gary, Indiana, and it was Ed Jones that made it all happen right here in Gary, Indiana.
Wow.
So there's far more to this. There are multiple layers to this story. You're going to get a sense of it today, and then after the film, you can ask me whatever you want, and we'll talk about it some more. All right?
And you're going to want to talk to him about this film.
Now, if you all like what you saw.
Oh, yeah. Awesome.
So if you have some questions, I will take your questions now. Thinking there's a lot more that got left on the cutting room floor. It's just too much to get in. But as we're working towards securing the deal with the network, when that happens, a lot of that additional footage is going to be included. And if we do a Blu-ray or DVD, then there's going to be a lot of extra stuff on that. Wow. Yeah. Took a lot of years to put this together. And to that extent, this story has just been generations in the making. When I started my research for the book, one of the first places that I landed at was the Palm Tavern, which was owned by one of the policy kings, Big Jim Knight. And Jerry Oliver was the owner at that time, who had taken over from Big Jim. And when we first sat down, she told me, you know, some of the Jones brothers' grandchildren have been running around Chicago trying to put this story together, so you may run into them. And that's actually what happened. So the whole coming of this film began with me doing the book. And that was released in 2003. Now we can fast forward to 2006 when I'm in the process of getting rid of one lawyer and establishing a new lawyer. So this particular day, it happened to be the biggest snowstorm of the year, but I had to go and make this meeting happen. So off downtown I go. Probably should have been riding a camel that day. So I get down here to this big tall office building on LaSalle Street, and I walk in, and the security guard at the desk snaps at me and says, hey man, you gotta sign in. Okay man, be cool, I got you, you know. So I do that. I start heading for the elevator bank. And in this precise moment in time, the elevator door was open and the people were coming off. And I could swear I heard this guard say something else to me. So I was about to step on the elevator and I turned around and he was standing in the middle looking dead at me. And when I got on the elevator, went up, kept my meeting. An hour later I came back downstairs and I'm about to leave. So I asked the guy, hey, do I need to sign out? No, you're good, man. But his whole everything changed. So I started to walk out the door and I turned around and I said, did you say something to me when I was getting on the elevator to go upstairs? He came out from behind the podium, looked me dead in my eye and said, yes, I said, thank you for writing your book about my grandfather. Oh, wow. And in that moment, it was like looking into the face of Ed Jones himself, because Ed Jones, his brothers, their father, and this nephew all have the same thing going on with their right eye. It's a medical term for it. I can't think of the name of it right now, but every one of them have it. All of the Jones men have this. So I knew he was telling the truth, and then he went on to tell me about a conversation that I actually had with him on the phone when I called to talk to his Uncle George. He says, listen, my aunt, Harriet, has been wanting to reach you. She just didn't know how. She's in Indonesia right now, but she'll be back in the States in about 7 months. I would love to put the two of you together. Wow. I said, okay, cool. I gave him the number. I said, make it happen. That summer, the three of us were sitting in a Starbucks in Hyde Park that doesn't even exist anymore. And she just went over the whole family history and told me that my book had been kicked around, the whole family reunion deal, and asked me if I would help her daughter put together a documentary on their family. And I said, of course. And that's how Harriet and I got together. So there was a lot of back and forth on the phone with her living in Paris. And by the way, Harriet truly wanted to be here today. As I'm standing here in Gary doing this film, she is in Sacramento, doing the film. So she couldn't be here, but she truly wanted to be. So hello from Harriet, and thank you all for being here from Harriet. Also, while I'm thinking about this, Queen had everything to do with her gift here today, so we need to give her a special round.
Mother Diva.
So anyway, this is how it all started to come together. So we spent a lot of weeks running around Chicago, running around Evanston, running around some of everywhere, and just kind of piecemealing the story together for what would become this film. And like I said, there's a lot of things that are left out of this, but the takeaway is really, you can talk about gangsterism, you can talk about policy, the lottery, and all this, but what it really comes down to is economics,
Right.
self-sustaining economics, what one can do for self. That was the driving force. So when you look at the time of the Jones brothers, as a people, we are 1 foot out of slavery, 1 foot out of the failures of the Reconstruction era. These guys found something that would work for them because policy, gambling on numbers was actually already going on everywhere. Some of this nation's greatest institutions were built with proceeds from lotteries, not the least of which are Harvard University, Stanford University. The entire settlement of Jamestown, Virginia was saved with a lottery. So there's a lot of tentacles that come out of this, and they literally reach into every part of the country. A lot of the work that I did on the book brought me to Gary, Indiana, because there was a chapter that was established here in Gary, Indiana, and went through the same stuff, was ultimately taken over by the mob, by way of murder, deception, and everything else. But you can look at St. Louis, you can look at Cleveland, you can look at virtually every other market, wherever there was a strong black community, attempting to be a thriving black community. You could absolutely believe that policy and numbers was at the center of it. My new book, King's Volume 2, The Book of Cleveland, will drop in about 2 weeks. And it covers the exact same things. Very different story. Cleveland is a very different place on earth. Unbelievable. You know, Chicago is known for the machine guns. Cleveland is known for the bombs. This is one, these guys are just bomb happy in Cleveland. So where in Chicago, they would stick you up or shoot your house up. In Cleveland, they would just blow your house up.
Wow.
So there was a lot of that going on. But again, these guys in Cleveland, same as Chicago, same as in Gary, they rose above all of that to use the money that they were generating to take care of the neighborhood, to build the institutions that once upon a time we had. Unfortunately, today we don't have those institutions anymore. Gentrification and lots of other things that we can speak to. But there was a time when we figured it out and we did it for ourselves, and it worked. And right about the time when it all started to come down in 1952, when Ted Rose was murdered, it's very interesting that this is also the same year of release that the United States Commerce Department, with the help of John Johnson, released a training film called How to Sell the Negro.
Right. I heard about that.
It was basically an instruction for white business owners telling them, hey, don't be afraid of Negroes. They like to spend money on good things too. Let them into your stores and spend money.
Mm-hmm.
That was 1952. What it shows you is just how closely the government had been watching the money in the black community. And once Ted Rose gone, pretty much open season. So this is the transition from being a self-supportive community into one that becomes a dependent community. That's how that labor began, and this is kind of where we end up at. Politically, there was that time when we should have looked back and re-evaluated our position. What I mean by that is, back in those days, we were Republican. Ed Jones and his guys convinced us to go Democrat for the reasons of that time. When those times ended, that was the time to take a look back and reevaluate. Should we stay with the Democratic Party?
No.
Should we go back to the Republican Party? Or should we start our own party?
Right.
We should have done that then. We did not, and we've been paying for it ever since, right up to and including today's politics.
Yes.
So that's really the takeaway. The money, the glamour, the glitz, all of that is one thing. But what they were doing with the money is the important takeaway. They were literally demonstrating to us what we were capable of doing. And so we're along the way, we kind of lost that acumen, that drive. So for me, that's really what this story represents. It's a reminder that we are not trying to reinvent the wheel. To the contrary, we're trying to get back to what we once had and move forward again with it, to progress. That's what it was about then. That's what it's about now. Anyone have a question? Yes, sir.
Go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead, Quab.
About the movie and George and the money takeover with with the.
Yeah.
So whatever became of that, or did he disperse it back with the family, and what type of businesses or what? Yeah, can you explain what's happening with that?
Yeah. Well, as we talked about in the film, basically George went rogue. There was always a lot of jealousy there. You know, it's living in the shadows of a brother like that, or a father or a mother. You know, consult anybody you know that walks in those shoes. It's not always an easy thing, but yeah, George went rogue. But the thing is, he was just always afraid of getting killed. Good reason, because lots of people around him got killed.
Right.
You know, so, and that's one of the reasons why this story really never made it into my family dinner table, the dinner tables of the kids that I was growing up with, because there came a time when our people literally stopped talking about this subject. In fact, as I began to get into this and do the research for it, one of the things that I recognized right away, from elder to elder that I went to and asked them, you know, Uncle Joe, do you know anything about the policy bracket? They all got the exact same look on their face. Their faces froze, their bottom lip started quivering, and then they would ask me, how the hell you know about that? They still carry that because they saw so many of their friends and relatives get beat down and get murdered. And they saw people lose things. They saw people have things taken from them. And they saw the law do nothing about it.
Right.
So they still carry that. In fact, Bobby Singstack, who's represented very early in the film as one of the descendants of the Chicago Defender newspaper empire, he was one of the first people to give me the phone numbers of certain people to contact. And the first thing he told me, look, first, do not tell them that I gave you this phone number. And if they snap on you, don't take it personal, because a lot of people still carry this. So just tread lightly. So I took that advice and it helped me get through it. But our people still carry that. And what really just aggravates me, I want you to think about this. So if you're alive in 52 and you're aware of everything that happened, when you fast forward to 1974, here you are sitting at the dinner table with your family, and most of us have the TV going. And here comes a TV commercial for the Illinois State Lottery.
What a slap in the face.
America sitting there going, well, dog, that ain't nothing but policy.
You're right.
So we still carry that to this day.
Absolutely.
Did George carry the money?
Yes, he
Karen.
did. I mean, as we point out in the film, he did that. It's very unfortunate, but, and the question always comes up, well, whatever happened to the Jones fortune? Well, on one hand, George stole it. He swindled it. But, and I have given this a lot of thought, and there's some logic to something here. George was very business acumen-minded. He taught his kids well. He taught his grandchildren well. My personal feeling is that Ed and his business financing was one thing. But what he did for his family is a totally different thing. So between Ed and what he would establish for his family on a personal level, plus what his mom would establish for her grandchildren, that's completely separate. So maybe the business money is all gone, but I think the family part of that, I think that's completely separate. The mother was the last one to die, actually. Yeah, she lived everybody. Wow. But that's my interpretation of it. Yes, ma'am.
First of all, I just want to thank the Gary International Black Film Festival, especially this lady here, because just to share with you guys, I met the filmmaker last year. I had been following this story because of Quincy Jones. He talked about the Jones brothers a lot, and he wanted to be like them. And so he was saying he wanted to do a movie, so I kind of followed it, and I found it at the Chicago International Film Festival. And the first person I thought about was you, Karen. And I said, this movie has to be in Gary. They need to see this. And Harriet had been so busy, And she missed the deadline. And so I reached out to Karen. I said, Karen, please, can we do something? And she said, go ahead and have her submit. And I know your team had to make a decision on that. So I really appreciate that. It seems like so much has come full circle. I don't know if you know this, but just looking at the footage about the Chicago Defender, the person who created the Defender, there was a movie about the Defender in this film festival, which was I just realized that. And then your connection to Gary. I mean, everything just came full circle. But what I want to know is, did Ed's daughter, was she like under some delusion that her father was just perfect? And she's like, my father wasn't a gangster. And then here come Quincy, like, no, he was a gangster.
That comes up. Now, first of all, let's just clear up. 'Cause
Okay.
I do this in the film.
Yeah.
I've done this forever, and this is something that Quincy and I have always gone back and forth. Always, and we're always going to go back and forth about it.
Okay.
But you got to understand where Quincy is coming from.
Right.
So coming from all of that, then he becomes famous, then he lands in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the people that he's been associated with in Hollywood, Irish, Italians, Jews, all of whom have their own, each one of those sects have their own underground background.
Right.
You know, the Irish mob, the Italian mob, the Jewish mob, so forth. Now, these are the people that he's been running around with for the last 50 years. Now, the difference is that they have all had books about their histories.
Nefarious history.
Quincy has always talked about the Jones Brothers, but has never had a book to back up everything he's been talking about.
Okay.
So this is kind of how he and I hooked up. Actually, we hooked up because I needed him to help me save the Palm Tavern.
Oh.
And then everything kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah.
So this is where he's coming from in terms of this gangster piece.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the reality. It's just like I say in the film. Ed Jones was not a gangster. He was a racketeer.
Okay.
Posse Kings were not gangsters. They were racketeers.
Okay.
Doesn't mean that we didn't have black gangsters back in the day, because we did.
Right.
But these guys were racketeers. And again, the difference is that a gangster uses the gun to get what he wants.
They were protecting
The
themselves
racketeer uses the gun
to protect what they
he
have.
has.
Okay.
But now, if you're a kid growing up, you know, all you see is Uncle Joe and everybody running around and they all got guns.
Right. Right.
Quincy was one of those kids growing up.
Around it.
This
Yes.
is where he
Yes.
gets this motif in his head.
Okay.
And he and I are always going to fight about it.
Let's see who win that
They're
fight.
telling us that we might have to wrap it up soon, but beautiful film, and I love that your book was the catalyst for a lot of the movie happening. How did you come to write the book?
That goes back to 1989, 90, 91, real quick. My generation, the guys that I grew up with, just like most guys in the country, we all have a thing about gangster movies. Al Capone, you know, just going back to, you know, whatever. George Raft, all those old films from the 20s and 30s. At one point, it just kind of occurred to me that I knew more about that than I did my own history as an African American. And I vowed one day that I was going to do something about that. And in December of 1992, I walked into the Books and Library at 95th and Hall.
Yes. Yes.
I did not leave for 9 years. That's a true story.
Wow.
Yes, sir.
It's very significant when you said it was about economics. And people need to know these were just nickels and dimes that generated that $10,000-$12,000. You know, think what we could do now. We all
Exactly.
black people.
You know, one of the things about that era, you know, it's always like, it came across like, you know, it was this great revelation that, you know, wow, these black guys are making all this money. It was not a revelation. As early as the 1920s, the Chicago Tribune was running full headlines about policy action on the South Side. So everybody in town knew.
Right.
Gene kind of knew it too. Okay, anyone else?
You know, it was interesting. I'm glad that to see this film, my uncle ran policy here. He was big at Gary, my father and my
That's
brother.
awesome.
What was your name?
My name is Ramon Moore. My uncle's name was Monty Coleman.
Okay.
Yeah, and he went on to own like several liquor stores and some other businesses. He had a barbecue restaurant.
So that, what happened in Gary began in Chicago, and they sent the Kelly brothers out here to make it all happen from the States Hotel.
Wow.
And that's a whole thing right there. But
Any final
experience in
questions?
Indianapolis and
Just-
other places in Indiana.
Just real quick, was she ever reunited with her daughter, the grandmother?
Yes,
Okay, the
Yes.
one that she gave up for adoption?
yes.
Okay,
That's, the first name is escaping me. Stevens, who was telling the story about the contracts at the end. That's how that happened.
and the people from the documentary, have some of them passed on now?
Yes, unfortunately, I lost Tim Black. He died at, I think he was 103 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there's a few that we lost.
Okay.
So we're running along.
Yes, it's time to go.
Is it kicking us out now?
As we do, can we thank our filmmakers?
Yes.